Hello and welcome to GoHTalk, a podcast of all things Guild of Heroes. I am Galgamir, leader of Forest of Sherwood, avid game player and podcast amateur. Firstly, if you're new to the podcast, then thank you for joining us. We hope you enjoy the show, and I do encourage you to listen to our previous episodes if you haven't already. If you like what you hear, then please do subscribe to the podcast. We aim to release one episode a week, focus on a particular topic and aspect of the game. We are of course on social media and all the usual places. Email as well if you'd like to write in, details of all that at the end of the show. Firstly, a belated Happy New Year to all. I hope you enjoyed your holidays, if you had any, and that you stayed safe during this busy transitioning time of the year.
Segment Select All.
Pending download.
A small pending download this week. A couple of days ago, a new patch was released that addressed some behavioural fixes for PvP opponents at the New Year's Eve tournament, and secondly, they added information about required guild level for raid bosses and dungeons. A few minor bug fixes and improvements otherwise.
Segment Select All.
Topic of the day.
So, new year, new you, right? New Year's resolutions are often at the top of people's lists when they think of ringing in the new year, and Guild of Heroes was no exception. Each month on social media, Guild of Heroes posts up a request for people to make suggestions or state changes, fixes they'd like made to the game. Just after New Year's, they posted the question for what people would like to see from GoH in 2019. Today, I thought we would go over a few of the suggestions made and discuss them, and what they could potentially mean for the game if implemented. To begin with, one suggestion on Twitter said, finding more ways of using mercenaries if you are the guild leader. Now this is an interesting one, as it's something I can partially relate to. Perhaps, maybe, not the same way as the poster, but nonetheless. With no specific, it's open to interpretation. Mercenaries are those love-hate carbon copies of characters, useful in a war if the person of the guild cannot attend the war personally, or does not wish to partake. I struggle sometimes to get an adequate pool of mercenaries to use in the war, and often I have people who are capped out asking for theirs to be used, so they can make more tokens. I don't really want to start a war only to lose it when I know the odds are stacked against me. I prefer to have at least 13 characters with a minimum 20 mercenaries to use in a couple of wars, but it's not always possible. So, wouldn't it be great if there was another smaller event or activity where a smaller pool of mercenaries could be used from the dedicated mercenary makers? This suggestion above tied into another post from someone stating more options to play with others online, not only in war. So, if there was something implemented in the game with more interaction between players and the ability to use mercenaries alongside the wars, then we'd have few people satisfied. Another side post asked for the guild leader to be able to dismiss mercenaries if they cannot or will not be used. This allows people to still be able to make more and not be burdened by others who are not capped. It's a good start to the suggestions so far. A completely different statement came up about having the ability to trade items between players. This is very common in amongst many RPGs, and it's also common to not have trade systems at all. Guild of Heroes has been around for a while now, and not yet implemented this change, which to me suggests it likely never will be. I could be completely wrong here, but here's the reason why I think the way I do. Trading in itself causes a faster game experience. When one person who has been running campaign or dungeon over and over for a particular item can suddenly get this by trading another item with a player, then the game itself gets sped up with regards to player progress. The less that people are needing to rely on a roll of the dice to get an item means the less they will likely play once they have all their top tier pieces. That's not to say it's concrete that would happen, but think about it this way. If you have to go to work to get a house, car and food for your family, then you'll have to work hard. If, however, you are given a car and simply providing a thank you card in exchange for it, then you need to work less because you don't need as many items. If now you win a house and only have to provide food, then sure, you'll still need to work, but nowhere near as long as you would for all the items altogether. Now, this is a poor blanket example, but the premise is the same. The less someone has to work to get something, then the less they will do what would otherwise need to be done, which would benefit a company or someone else. Unlike real life, this is a game, and you could simply quit at any time. There's no demand for you to play. At the end of the day, I don't think trading will ever be a thing. I do like the idea, but I can see its drawbacks and reasons why it would never come to be. A couple of repeated ones from people were the requests for new areas, items, and sets in general. I personally have not finished the game. Getting to the end boss, I'm not sure of what percentage has, but obviously there are a few. And apart from rerunning old areas once you've cleared content, what else is there to do? So I can see the point of this request. One user on Facebook posted up a list of suggestions. Here are a few. Stop rewarding XP potions at max level. This apparently has been going on for quite a while. Seems a bit of code needs to be added to the offering of those things once you max out. If anything, it simply becomes a gold vended item. Level the classes. Archer is by far the strongest, even when the other player's power level is lower than mine and neither use potions. This ties into my basic rundown of the classes a couple of weeks back. Seems there is definitely some fine tuning needed to be done, even if I do like playing an overpowered archer. Bring back better odds in finding set items in guild chests. Now, I don't know how long ago this would have been. It doesn't state. And it's an interesting one also. The odds are stated to be an equal chance, 1 in 6, of winning a particular item in a chest. I find personally it is pure luck that can give someone a constant run on getting the item they are after first time. I've been lucky with bonus events having them drop first time, whilst others I would nearly empty the entire chest. Bring back the odds of finding good guild banners instead of low-level dust and scrap ones. Now, I do often find they outweigh a good banner. The percentage is low for a really nice 5-star find for me. Those cheap banners will sit in my storage for a while before I'll eventually make myself use them. It's a small benefit over simply bendering. In the event bonus ring and amulet, put a health rune slot and stop putting in a greed rune slot. It's interesting. I will scrutinise an orange item quite hard based on its rune slot. Even when all other stats might be in favour, I will often stick with the purple I picked up at random as it has better DPS, or health lots in it. Greed slots, whilst I do not help me fight stronger players or monsters easier. The final one was a shout out to the veterans of GoH, those who have been playing from the beginning, asking for a bit of extra kindness for their loyalty. Now, I don't really have a problem with this. However, I don't really know how many games that provide anything like this. In some situations, it is more the fact of having something from the game and that time period which can no longer be attained. In the case of GoH, perhaps a skin set? Given no specifics were asked with this request, it's open to scrutiny and an open-ended answer, that being, well, what would you want? In my humble opinion, if you are asking for something, then ask for exactly what it is you want. Otherwise, what you might receive will be unwanted anyway. Some people will be grateful no matter what, but sometimes expectations can cloud judgment, especially when there's a desired request. A few other small requests which stood out were things like improving the rewards obtained from the dailies. Many people feel it's not worth the effort given the low benefit. To coincide with that, someone suggested a more rewarding box from doing a month of consecutive dailies. To me, that would need to be a considerable reward, and a feat at that too. The one final one that did bring out was, I believe I only saw one person suggest. Now, having said that, I'm only reading the English spoken responses, as I'm unfortunately not multilingual. Add another class, perhaps an assassin. That did stick out to me. One, as I only saw one person ask for it, but two, it would be something very different for the game, and perhaps give people more reasons to play. Granted, the only thing to really break up the classes is a weapon and an offhand, and some different spells and abilities. But despite that, I do know people who have rolled other classes to break up the monotony. Sometimes, playing the harder class is more fun. I even recently made a wizard to try out, and brought it up to power level 15. It's a small change to the grand scheme when playing the game, but perhaps enough to make people want to play more, or come back. Couple this with new areas, and now having the pets as well to level with you, and it could make quite a winning combo of changes. There were a few silly ones along the way, and a few laughs to be had from some people making a joke for some funny changes, but overall the responses so far I think are good. The game exists because people have such a strong interest in it. There were some heated comments, but it's passion driven from the game they enjoy, and for that reason, perhaps, they have made the game a little more unbearable from some game breaking changes, things of recent, or from lack of changes at all. If you have an idea or two, then I do suggest you hit social media up and post on the Guild of Heroes page as to what you'd like from the game going forward. Without you, the players, and your feedback, the game will not continue. Well, that's going to be all for this episode today. If you like what you hear and want to write into the show, you can find us on social media. GoTalk Podcast on Facebook and Twitter at GoTalk. You can write a comment on the YouTube uploads. Visit the podcast page, anchor.fm/GoTalk Podcast. You can even send us an email at gotalkpodcast@gmail.com. Or perhaps you might even see my character in Greyhaven. If you have suggestions, comments, stories, or anything else you want to contribute, please do feel free to send me a contact. A shout out to Steve DeClifford of Steve DeClifford Music for the opening and closing music. You can find full tracks of his work on Facebook at Steve DeClifford Music. This particular song is called Acoustic Alchemy. Links in the show notes. The episodes are hosted in all good podcast locations. Please do subscribe to be notified when new episodes are released. This is Galgamir, signing off from GoTalk. Thank you for listening, and I'll catch you next time.